Mul on hea meel siia kutsuda oma hea kolleeg, kes täna platseerub Viinis, aga on pärit Prantsusmaalt. Ja ta tuleb, räägib meile teemast, kuidas maailm läheb avalikumaks. Ehk siis topic what Thomas gonna present is going public in all the means what you can imagine. So please, Thomas Marcadet, floor is yours.
Hello everyone. I'm also going to apologize because I'm going to give my presentation in English. Thank you for opening the door on that topic. And as we have learned from, I think it was Mr. Vaher's presentation, apparently, as you can hear from my accent, probably I'm French. Apparently our president likes to walk, and you will find I like to walk as well during this presentation. I was asked to give this presentation today to you, and I'm delighted, focusing on trust, and this is called Going Public. Maybe this works. Yes, Going Public, and I want to talk about 3 specific issues with you today. I'm an insurance broker, as you know. I've been working in this industry for 7 years now. Before that, I was working for a bank. Various jobs in banks, including internal auditing and trading floors. But I'm not going to talk to you too much about insurance today. I want to talk a little bit more about risk and trust. But these are, I would say, the topics that are hot for our clients across Europe and across Eastern Europe, and including in the Baltics, in a risk management perspective, as well as in an insurance as a solution topic. So those topics are cyber, IPO, and reputation. We've said a few words about cyber, and I'm going to maybe have a little bit more focus on that. IPOs, we're seeing now that the crisis is behind us, more mergers and acquisitions, more IPOs into the market, and we're talking and discussing with clients about the changing nature of IPO risk and how to manage it up front. And then finally, and it will be a very good connection with the previous presentation, I'll say a few words about reputation, but I can only agree with everything that has been said before about preparation, careful planning, and not being caught, as you said, with your pants down when the crisis happens. So as I said, I'm an insurance broker, and today I'm going to tell you why you should be doing my job. So convincing people, stakeholders within your company about the reality of the risk, understanding the risk, as well as what to do about it. And if you're doing that and you're doing my job, I'm hoping that you will be talking to one of us at some point. But the main point is understanding the nature of the risk. That's what all the clients ask me about. The reality of risk, what is the main risk management issues that we see clients facing, and what to do about it on all those 3 topics. The idea we've seen in recent years is how to bring the risk management topics to the board level. Coming from the insurance industry, a lot of my clients think you're a broker, you're here to make a price, and then you shut up and that's it. We're trying to change the conversation, the way we talk with our clients, to bring more advice, best practices from other countries, from other clients, and how to help your management be aware of the risk they face. Because in the end, when those risks happen, when they're realized, it is also a risk for the CEO and for the board themselves, which face the liabilities in the end. So let's talk a little bit about cyber risk. I'm sure you're all very much aware of what is going on in that field. I'd like to talk a little bit about what is cyber risk in the view of Marsh and how we discuss it. Is it possible to have the slides here in my small screen to see my slides? What we call is whether it's malicious attack or an accidental event happening within your company. It is an impact on your IT system. What we call the IT system is not only the one you own, but today in modern IT risk management, it's mostly outsourced. As it was said before when we talked about hacktivism, these attacks are not necessarily criminal. They're not necessarily after the money. They can be political. They can be activism because you're involved in energy, because you're involved in, I don't know, drugs, because you're involved in banking or some other sector. This in turn has an operational impact, which is called widely, not only by Marsh, as the CIA impact for confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data, which then has a financial impact on all the companies. That's generally what is called or coined cyber risk. The impact can be on the assets, the actual cyber crime, stealing of money, and then it can have an indirect impact through the loss of turnover because you cannot operate your company. Additional costs including informing your clients and third-party liability, so generating claims from the people whose data you have lost, for example. So that's the general framework that I'd like you to keep in mind when we talk about this risk. Then the reality of the risk, if I gave this presentation 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a lot of people would be telling me, you know, that's happening in the US because they have different laws, or this cannot happen to my company, you're just trying to scare us, it's not real. The reality that we're seeing in Europe, in each and every country, in each of our clients, is that the risk is there. And I just have a few illustrations. I like to use anecdotes that I find more illustrative for this type of risk, of recent attacks that have some significant importance. In 2017, a beauty clinic was hit in Lithuania by hackers, unprofessional hackers, 20 years old, young kids, and they stole pictures and security, social security numbers of all the patients of that clinic before and after operation. And they tried to blackmail the people, the patients of that clinic. The blackmail didn't work and they published the photo. A lot of the clients then sued the clinic, which went instantly bankrupt. And that's a very small impact for a small beauty clinic of how fast making your private information public can ruin the business. The second example I have here is very, very famous, and there's a lot of literature already written on it. It's called Target. This happened in the US. It was a retail chain of supermarkets in the US. They had apparently very good IT security, but still hackers got in and were able to steal the credit card data of every single person that was paying at the cashier. So when they published this information to the public, they went bankrupt, so Chapter 11, within 1 week. Because of course no wonder you wanted to shop in those places anymore. So there's a combined effect of the cyber attack itself and the reputation impact. And actually it's an interesting case because they had a very good IT security, and they even had an insurance policy, which at that time was very rare. But the hackers managed to get in there because they got in through the IT system of the air conditioning company, and the air conditioning company had a very poor security. And it was very well connected, for some strange reasons, with the IT system of Target. So it's another example of a cyber attack happening even though you have taken all the good measures in your company, but it can happen with your business partners, the one you work with. The third example I'd like to talk is when we realized the risk in Europe for business interruption due to a cyber attack. This is now the biggest example of what has happened last year with the Petya and NotPetya attack. Maersk, so the transporter, has announced that it cost them a total of $300 million. So now we have a real risk when your data is compromised. Here it's less a question of privacy than an impact on your business. Finally, I have a fourth example here. It's called FACC. You probably don't know that company. I'm now based in Vienna. My role is European and I live in Vienna. And in Austria, if you talk about cyber risk, everybody thinks about this company. And FACC is a company who was victim of what is called the fake president scam. So someone came into the company, studied thoroughly the way this company works, and then sent an email to the accounting department for a wire transfer impersonating the CEO and the CFO of the company, and stole 50 million euros. It was one of the biggest cases reported. And this, to illustrate a bit about this, I'd like to show you a short video about social engineering fraud. If you Bear with me for 1 second, it's going to load. Thank you.
Dag Fien. Dus Caroline. Voilà. Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja,
Insecten.
alsjeblieft.
Ik voel 2 insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenie?
Zo, hè.
Een moto. Oranje.
Pas erop.
Zenit.
Oui, oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de... Met wie?
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
Die vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Maison rouge, balcon blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
97. Last month you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh nee. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
Are you scared yet? This video, I think, is a very good illustration because we all have our lives online and very different ways in our personal lives to treat our confidential information, our presence on the social networks. It can be also the case for our parents or our children who have different way of interacting with the social media and not necessarily protecting their information enough. I think the video also serves to illustrate another purpose, is how hackers are now stealing money into companies, and I'm going to come to solution prevention because my time is running short as well. 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, let's say, you would receive an email from a Nigerian prince telling you that he had inherited $10 million and wanted to share half of it with you. This was probably in English, this was probably poorly written, and it was the same generic email to every day. It doesn't happen that way anymore. Hackers today do business planning. They scan the internet and the dark net for weak companies to define where their targets will be. They plan their heist for months. And what they will do is they will not go after the most protected companies or the most protected people. So they will go within the company at someone who has not necessarily any job in accounting, can be me. How do they get to me? They will get to me exactly like this because they will look at all my information on social media, all my traces on the internet, and they will send a message to me that I will accept, that I will click on, and that I will install. It can be massively emails. You can try that with your own company. Send an email saying you won a free voucher on Amazon for €50. If you're the first 100 to click, you get €1,000. See how many people click in the first day. Imagine if someone has malicious intentions when they do that and what happens to your company. Then that means you have a new roommate and he's a hacker and he's not benevolent. He's going to stay in your system for very long, unnoticed, and just reading your emails, trying to understand your company. So when the email comes out to the accounting department on a Friday evening, very urgent, from the CEO, it will be perfect. Because it will be worded how that company words it, it will be the right amount that is authorized to be wired, it will be the right currency, it will be the right territory, and it will be untraceable. This is what is happening today, And this is what we're seeing more and more happening, and which is why prevention is of utmost importance in any company. You all know about GDPR, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just as you know, the regulation is increasing for cyber risks, and that is a good idea from our regulatory friends to protect the data of the people. It was meant, I would think, initially against the GAFA, but is impacting all of us and all the companies in Europe, and it may have operational consequences in the form of fines or in the form of notification costs, meaning if you lose the data and you notify the regulator within 72 hours, they will probably ask you to notify your client. And an SMS will not be enough, probably. You will have to set up a call center, maybe do credit card monitoring for your clients. This is an illustration of the cost of NotPetya last year on business interruption. And a slide before going into the risk management of what companies do when faced with those risks. Like any risk, like cyber risk, but you can imagine that this is a flood risk. What can you do to avoid flood risk? Well, don't build buildings, then you have no flood risk. If you want to avoid cyber risk, don't use computers. Don't use cell phones, then you have no risk. But there are ways to reduce, to avoid risks by minimizing the use of computers, for example. To focus on the frequency of the risk, so the risk of being attacked, a lot of companies have now set up their own cybersecurity teams, which is a good thing to do on a daily basis, to train your people. And if you want to focus on severity, so understand how to deal with the very, very large risk, either you're able to assess it or to transfer it, and insurance can be one of the solutions. So the most common problem that we're faced with when we talk with clients about their cyber risks is managing the complexity, understanding where it is, where could I be attacked, involving different parties. If you're a risk manager, maybe you're not an IT expert. If you're a general counsel, maybe you don't know much about the operational aspects of a risk manager. So putting everybody around the table, I often have more than 10 or 15 people in meetings discussing cyber risk, can be a difficult task. And then finally, quantifying the risk, and that's a question we get a lot from clients. Again, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big failure from Marsh to do this for our clients, because we didn't have the appropriate solution. Or we had insurers telling us, you know what, I'll insure that risk, but before that I'll do a 3-month audit involving 20 people within your client, and you're going to pay for that. You can imagine how many cyber policies that insurer sold. So now we're doing it a bit differently, and this is what we would recommend also our clients doing. Involve the management board, because it is their stake. We work, and the CEO of the Naval Group, it's a company that does a product that is not sensitive at all. They make nuclear submarines. They were victim of a hacking attack during a big tender, and now the CEO of that company is going around everywhere to say, no, IT security and cybersecurity is the CEO's problem, and you should be talking to the people who are able to assess it and transfer the risk. And the solution is also to provide simplified risk assessment. So what we see clients doing more and more is relying on simple tools that make the risk real to their management. We have a few illustrations of the tools that we use, which mean, why would hacker attack me? What are my weaknesses? So we use the same algorithms that the hackers do to scan the internet and see, okay, what comes up if I look your company up in terms of how do you fare compared to your peers? What are other companies doing in terms of benchmarking? And what would be the maximum impact? So we use models, actuary models, to simulate what could be the cost of a privacy breach or of a business interruption. Of course, it's a model. It's not perfect. It's not reality. There is a joke that the point that an artist and an actuary have in common is that they both fall in love with their models. So there is an actuarial model behind it. It's, I don't know if it's pretty or not, but it is only a model, but it serves the purpose of making people aware at management level in a simplified format of the risk. Then it is debatable. Maybe someone tells you your risk is 50 million, 100 million, 200 million euros. Okay, maybe you don't believe that advisor, but you know your risk is not 5 euros. So maybe you can start transferring part of that risk to secure yourself as a company and your CEO in their own liability. And of course, we have a lot of companies who like to go into a deeper analysis, and Marsh, just like a lot of other providers, lawyers, IT security firms, can provide the deeper analysis to go deeper into the risk, but we recommend to do it the other way around. Do the simple analysis first, the first risk assessment, know what your risk is, insure it if you want, if you think the price is right, and then take the time to do a 1-year analysis. Because it's not a question of if you will be hit, it's a question of when your company will be hit by the cyber attack. And at that point, if you had the opportunity to protect yourself and you didn't, you may feel sorry at that point in time. My time is very short, so I'm going to go briefly on the 2 other topics and what I wanted to mention. Public offering of securities. Again, the financial markets are regaining somewhat their colors after the crisis. The IPO risk for the companies is the regulatory and the shareholder pressures they face. It can have anything to do with problem with the financials, problem with the product, conduct problem, as we mentioned in the previous presentation, something that has to do with an individual. It can have something to do with a whistleblower providing information to the public. All those can make your IPO fail or impact the share price during the IPO itself. The consequences can be the securities claims by the shareholders, proportionate to the size of the emissions, a sort of Damocles for the future DNOs that this risk is pending for them, for all the management for potential years, that they get sued for anything happening out of that IPO, and potential costs of the liability of all the partners that are involved in an IPO. So banks, lawyers, accountants, any form of advisors that will increase the cost of an IPO. So for the risk management issues we're seeing when we discuss with clients recently of IPOs in Europe is how to manage the limits of liabilities of your advisors and the negotiation you're having with your banks, with your accountants. Ring fencing the risk for directors and officers, that is protecting them from that specific event that is the IPO, and they're separating it from the day-to-day business, and optimizing the issuing costs. What we recommend, or what we see as most efficient among our clients in terms of risk management, is to analyze the liabilities with the help of your lawyers, with the help of your advisors, and optimize the risk transfer. When I say risk transfer, in this case, I'm meaning insurance. There is now the possibility to ring fence all the liability that is linked with the securities issuance within a single policy, which means encompassing your bankers or potentially even the accountants that are proofreading your financial statements, which will simplify the negotiation you're having with those guys, as well as provide you with a sense of security going forward. And it will help also the IPO in itself by reducing, by putting the costs of the insurance policy within the issuance cost, which may have a tax impact for that company. Finally, and to open onto a more broader topic that was already widely painted by my predecessor here, reputation is something that we're seeing now as an insurance topic, which means that there are now clients who are safeguarding their risk through insurance, either for their PR costs and the management of after the crisis, and now, which I find more interesting, the loss of business that follows a reputation incident, which is of course very difficult to quantify what relates to that incident or not. But it is a trend, and we're starting to see things like this. I don't know if you've seen this reputation case that happened in France. Lasagna brand were found out to be using horse meat and not beef meat, which resulted in a big food scandal, the products being taken away and the company having to apologize. Of course, it damaged greatly the reputation of that company when they had to reveal to the public that they were doing that. Second case that you probably have heard more about, the emission scandals at Volkswagen. I could cite many others. Poor crisis management at, I think it was British Telecom, after there was a cyber attack, and the CEO went on TV and said, "We've had a cyber attack." The first question of the journalist was, "How many records were affected?" "I don't know." "When will you know?" "I don't know." And that was also probably very damaging for the reputation there. This was very much covered before. Damage to your customers, shareholders, revenues, to your brand, to the environment as well. And the risk and management issues, again, painted before, is how do you prevent it from happening? So make sure that you don't have a reputation scandal. I would say that's the first one. How do you deal with the unpredictability? That you're not caught with your pants down. And then the complexity of quantifying what is the loss and how you would want to count this if you want to transfer that risk, for example. Again, what we're seeing, even though this is more of a nascent issue within our clients and not necessarily a mature market, is a lot of mapping and controls beforehand to avoid the crisis from happening in the way you manage communications, the way you manage cyber risk, and the way you manage legal risks. And preparedness, again, as was rightfully said, knowing what the plan is, who is the team, who will communicate and how. We see a lot more crisis training, so simulating an incident for the top management with actors playing the roles of victims or of journalists to train them to crisis communication. The second thing is to quantify the brand value or the reputation upfront, so knowing before the crisis happens and ensuring that. How will this insurance work? Well, they will give you a grade. Let's say your grade is 100. Once the crisis happens, your grade drops to 50, and the insurer will then compensate you a certain amount of money until your reputation is back up to 100. But for that, you need to quantify what your reputation is before the crisis. And that is what is starting to change within the market. And I said strong crisis management through training and planning. Thank you all for your attention. I'll be happy to take some questions.
So thanks, Thomas. Do we have any questions from the audience? No, but I have one actually. Or maybe let's do, I did this last year and I asked the audience, how many of you have property insurance or your company has a property insurance? Raise your hand, please. Kellel on varakindlustus ettevõttel? Okay, we see a lot of hands actually. How many of cyber insurance policies you have? We have one. Last year we had also one, but this was another one, so we have two in Estonia. What is actually, when we go around with clients in Estonia, we see that there's a lot of people know about, property insurance, car insurance, and all the kind of simple stuff. Why do you think that people don't want to secure actually the most evident risk today? It's not fire, because fire can be quantified as a 60-year event one time, but actually the cyber risk is so unknown and so present actually.
I would say that it's in every market. It has to do with two things. It has to do with understanding, trying to quantify the risk, and this is what I tried to touch in this presentation at the beginning. I think it also has to do with the culture and our human behavior, connecting with what the police captain said this morning. There is a trend following also in very different markets. Where I come from in France, a lot of clients were not insuring as well, and now it's become the norm in the market that all companies are insured, because there were a few first movers that were that actually saw the reality of risk better than the others and started doing that. And it pushed the others to start insuring it. So I'd say it's about changing the culture by bringing the top management elements to quantify and to understand the risk. And I think the decision then comes very naturally from the management to say, I understand my risk and I accept it, I can live with it, and that's my management decision, which is fairly acceptable. Or I understand the risk and I don't want to bear it and I want to transfer it. And then you can make an educated decision.
Okay, thanks. And one of the other side of the story, Estonian government has announced that we will have at least 4 or 5 IPOs coming up in this year, next year. What is the kind of, if I'm an investor, private investor, what is my right to demand, for example, or maybe I need to ask the IPO prospect to have the insurance on that, or what is the security I will have after seeing the prospect, what they're presenting? And so is this very common to have IPO insurances and investors can rely on that?
I would say that the IPO insurance is to protect the company that is issuing, as well as its directors and officers and its stakeholders against potential claims from the shareholders, as well as the old shareholders, so those that are selling their shares. And it is only a consequence that it will protect the investors. But as an investor, what I'm seeing in the prospect, I'm supposed to believe as true and represent it as true. So I'm protected by the law if anything in the reality is different from what was announced during all the financial communication. Then I will be entitled to claim against the issuing company if I have bought the stock and its price has dropped and I've been a victim of that by claiming under the securities law in Estonia or in other territories of misrepresentation, false information, etc.
Okay, thanks, Thomas, and glad to have you here.